Good morning, everyone. My name is Billy, and I am the founder and organizer of Bookstore Romance Day. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this Sunday morning for A Modern Love, a look at contemporary romance, presented by Bramble. Thank you to all of our authors for being here. Thank you to Becca for moderating. Thank you to all of our sponsors this year, especially to Bramble, who is our headline sponsor this year and has put together this panel for us, as well as putting together one yesterday. I am deeply grateful to them for everything that they have done. I will be posting some links in the chat where you can purchase books and audiobooks. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A because they will get lost if you put them in the chat. And with all of that being said, housekeeping out of the way, I throw it over to Becca. Thank
Okay. Hello. Just opening up the Q&A. Welcome. I am a bookseller at Island Books near Seattle, Washington. Been there for 4 years. It's excellent if you ever need to see a ton of typewriters. That's the place to go. Um, Avid romance reader, amongst other things, and I am very excited to do second year moderating for Bookstore Romance Day. Um, we are here to talk about modern contemporary romances, and I'm going to have each of the authors go through, introduce themselves, give a little blurb about their latest book, which I've gotten to all of them. They're a good time, very fun. So let's start with Vi.
Good morning. My latest romance novel, because I did write two thrillers in the last few years, but my latest romance novel, since that's what we're here to talk about, is called Jilted. And it's about a woman who's obsessed with weddings her whole life. She writes for a wedding magazine covering weddings, and then she gets left at the altar. And now her dream job has turned into a nightmare. And she winds up meeting a groomsman on a series of weddings that they're going to cover over a year. And it's kind of a enemies to lovers kind of vibe.
Awesome. Zen, do you want to go next?
Hi, yeah, I'm Zen. I write fantasy and romance, though not romantasy yet. I'm actually dialing in from, so I'm usually based in the UK, but I'm originally from Malaysia, and I'm actually dialing in from my dad's office. So there's a very paternal set of shelves behind me. Mine are not nearly so authoritative. But yeah, my latest book is called Behind Frenemy Lines. Excellent title from my editor. I can't take any credit for that. My titles are invariably changed by my publishers because they are so bad. But there is a legal romance about two lawyers at a law firm in the city of London, very similar to the kind of law firm I worked at for 11 years and then eventually managed to escape. And it's again a kind of frenemies to lovers kind of thing where they are work nemesis, and the female lead Kriya keeps running into Charles at every kind of professional mishap she has, and he's invariably kind of awkward and rude. And then she moves to a new firm following her boss and finds out that they are assigned to the same office. At the same time, her boss, who is extremely divorced, starts hitting on her, and to avoid his advances, she starts fake dating her roommate. So yeah, that's what Behind Frenemy Lines is about.
Okay. Avery?
I'm Avery. I write adult and new adult sports romance. Primarily so far it's been hockey. My last release was Offside in July. It's a college hockey romance, kind of like Enemies to Lovers light. She hates him, but he's like all in from day one. He's like the bad boy of hockey from her school's rival team. She just broke up with her ex, who's the captain of the other team. So it's like a little bit of fake dating, lots of banter, and yeah.
Okay. Sorry if you get any ambient plane noise. I live in the flight path of SeaTac Airport, so it can be kind of loud. Hopefully it doesn't come through. Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia, and I am in Melbourne, Australia. My background is Chinese Indonesian. I was born and raised in Jakarta in Indonesia. My debut is called Salty, Spiced, and a Little Bit Nice, and it came out in May. So it's about a woman who is trying to escape her controlling family. So she escaped to the other side of the country to chased her dream of building a sugar-free bakery because she has type 1 diabetes. But along the way, she comes across a lot of challenges and hurdles, and the only person that can help her overcome all that is the one man that she can't stand. It's her brother's best friend. It's her childhood crush. So it's got a lot of banter and fake dating and enemies to lovers. Yeah, it's a lot of tropes in there.
We love tropes. That's why we're romance readers. Okay. Let's start with the broader questions. How did you get into writing romance and modern romance specifically?
I'll start, and I'm interested to hear other people's stories. So I was a fantasy writer before, so I started publishing fantasy in 2014. I would fantasy kind of at longer length. I started short stories, publishing short stories before then. Um, and for me, it was kind of an accident. So during lockdown, during COVID, we obviously, most of us weren't moving from our homes very much, and I just wanted a bit of escapism, but not the kind of escapism that fantasy gives you. I wanted to kind of escape into the previous version of my life, where I could jump on a train and go see my friends in London and go to restaurants with them and that kind of thing. And around the same time, I also got really into K-dramas, because I had, some free time at home. And I really liked how they combined, kind of fairly chewy issues like kind of corporate intrigue and political corruption and kind of family drama with really fun, lighthearted, tropey romance. And the one thing you can say for K-dramas is that they are unapologetically romantic. So that was funnily my kind of gateway, and I enjoyed them so much I thought I would write one of my own. So that became my first contemporary romance novel, The Friend Zone Experiment. And Behind Frenemy Lines is kind of like it's a standalone, but it's like an extended universe, kind of in the same setting. So kind of modern London.
Awesome. K-dramas are a good time. I find they take a lot out of me though. I have to do them in small doses, like incremental, like watch one series and then I need a break for a year before I can do the emotional investment. Yeah, I love it though when different books by the same author are in the same universe, like slightly overlapping, and you like maybe catch a glimpse of someone from book one, or I love that. Anyone else on how you got into writing romance?
Um, I was an attorney for 15 years, like Zen said she was. So it's very interesting. A lot of romance authors are actually attorneys beforehand, which you wouldn't think kind of lends itself to each other, but there's a lot of us. So I was an attorney, and I've always been an avid reader, and I just kind of wanted to do it for me, to write a book. So I had started writing a book and kind of put it aside for years. And then I was hit by Hurricane Sandy, and we lost the entire first floor of our house, had 4 foot of water through it. And it kind of changed everything. Like my kids lost all their toys, and it just made me kind of realize what was important. And I really wasn't happy in my day to day life, working. So I kind of just decided to go put it out there and see what happens. And that was 49 books ago.
So, well, and it's cool that you
So
pick it back up too. Go ahead, Cynthia.
sorry. So I've always been a lifelong reader. I actually didn't get to reading romance until I was probably in high school. But as soon as I read my first romance, there's something so happy and familiar and joyful about it because you know that at the end of the book, you're going to get your happy ending. So I thought I really wanted to write something that I would enjoy. So it's always a happy place, a joyful place whenever I open a romance book. So I think that's why I'm drawn to writing romance and reading a lot of romance as well.
I actually like wrote a lot as a child, like lots and lots and lots and lots of stories, and I read a ton. And then I kind of like fell off from that, and you kind of go on with your life, right? Like you never really consider that to be a viable thing. And then I had kids, and I was up really late with them or in the middle of the night, and I kind of found Kindle Unlimited at like very, very earliest days. and sort of just fall down that hole and like fall back in love with reading. Discovered romance for the first time. And I was like, oh, so this is what I've been missing. And then like I just started writing as like something for myself, kind of, like to have something. I never really anticipated it going anywhere. And then it just sort of took on a life of its own. And I was on Wattpad, and Wattpad paid. And then I sort of ended up self-published, and then ended up traditionally published. So it's just been a very long and interesting path.
Wattpad is a very worthwhile thing to get started on. I used to read a ton on Wattpad. Feeds into two other questions. First one, it seems like we're all romance readers. All the authors are romance readers. Are there any other genres you typically read, or is it what's the mix?
Thrillers a lot. I read thrillers and romance mostly.
The dichotomy, good dichotomy.
And I love a thriller that has like a little bit of a sexiness to it, because then I'm getting the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I read a real range. So I read I obviously read a fair amount of science fiction, fantasy, and romance, but I also read nonfiction. And I it's a difficult genre to describe. One of my favorite genres is sort of what they used to call middle brow fiction, and the best way I can describe it, it's kind of books by dead white ladies, of the kind published, reprinted by publishers like Persephone Press and Virago. So kind of forgotten, in a way, forgotten bestsellers, and female authors who were very popular at the time and often wrote a lot about women's interiority, which might have often included romance, but not exclusively. So I'm really keen on those. They're my kind of secret passion. But yeah, a real range.
I love that.
Okay, we have an audience question. What comes first for you when writing, the story or the characters?
Hard for me. They kind of just go hand in hand. Like the story could only ever fit those characters. So like they kind of just come to me as a bundle. I don't know, the ether.
I think for me, it usually starts with an idea, but then I will normally start to create the characters first. So I'll start from the characters and then I'll expand on that idea and then make it longer and somehow fit into the two main characters that I've created.
Yeah, I think that they often come together. For me to write a book, there's generally has to be kind of two things present. So I need to have an idea of a relationship between two characters I want to explore. And often it is a romantic relationship, including in my fantasy, but not always. So my most recent fantasy novel, Blackwater Sister, featured a grandmother and a granddaughter who hadn't, who meet as when the granddaughter's an adult, an estranged grandmother. So it's exploring that relationship. But so it's usually an odd couple. And then there's usually something about the world, maybe because my background is in fantasy, kind of I'm quite interested in world building. And I think you do a lot of world building even for contemporary novels, because you're always presenting a specific setting to the reader, which they might not be necessarily immediately familiar with. And the kind of story kind of seems to naturally kind of blossom from those two things.
Not a plotter. So sometimes I have an idea that is a storyline, a conflict. I know what the twist is going to be, and then I kind of work out from that. And other times I get a character in my head and what they're going to be like, and then I'll just start from that. So I think it depends for me.
Okay. Let's see. How do people usually react when they find out what you do for a living?
I think people
Um,
are interested. It's always like if my husband's a school teacher and he'll say what he does for a living, and people are like, oh, that's great. And then you'll say you're a writer, and they're like, really? Because they don't know a lot of writers necessarily. So I think people usually are very interested, but then it's always interesting when they ask what you write. And then you say romance, and then it really separates how people react. Because some people make snarky comments, and other people, especially women, are, all about it. So.
Nothing like someone coming into the bookstore and saying, no, no, I want a real book. And you're like, okay, I don't think we can be friends.
I know. And people like to put it down too. I hate to say that. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, she writes smut. And I'm like, just smile. So hopefully those people aren't my friends. So
Why contemporary romance instead of historical or fantasy romance? Is there like something that drew you to telling that specific kind of story?
I think for me, it was because of the initial genesis of the first book. It was almost a way of re-experiencing my youth, as it were. Not that I'm especially aged, but I started writing. I guess not dissimilar to Avery. I started writing these romances when I had just had children, and I'd also moved away from London, where I spent my 20s. And so there were quite big changes in my life. And in a way, it's writing these romances in the contemporary setting of modern London was a way of revisiting that era of my life, and the freedom of it. And also the kind of, I suppose, the potentiality of romance. When you're in a long-term relationship, even a happy long-term relationship, that kind of initial novelty and excitement is something that's some years behind you. And I think I always think in terms of books and fictional relationships, it's a way of accessing or re-experiencing that period, whether as a reader or a writer.
Yeah, I think for me,
I
it's
think for me,
oh,
sorry, you go.
no, sorry. Um, yeah, for me, I think it was just especially like the blend of like what I gravitated towards. Like the sports, obviously that lends itself to contemporary the most. I grew up watching hockey. I'm in Canada. Hockey's like a big part of our household. Both my kids play, my husband played. We had seasons tickets. We're like a hockey family. Um, so it was just sort of like a very natural fit because I do know the sport pretty well. I try to like weave it into the plot. I think I'd be a little lost without like a sport. We'll see. Fantasy like really intrigues me. I don't know though, like timelines and world building are not necessarily my strength. So never say never because I always kind of watch from the sidelines. Like, it'd be interesting, but yeah, it seems a little daunting to veer too far out of the lane.
I think I'm echoing what Avery said. Like world building in fantasy feels very daunting for me. Like I don't really know how all those fantasy writers they have the brain cell to build all this complex world. So for me, it's mostly I'm probably not able to do it. I don't know, but never say never as well. So we'll see. Maybe one day we'll see.
Pardon the new intrusion.
I love to see
Another,
the excursions.
her name is Indy, in case anyone wants to know.
I have
Uh,
mine locked out, so you might hear a scrape.
yeah. Another audience question. If you could be any character from your books, who would you be and why?
It's a good question. I think I would be so I co-write with Penelope Ward as well as writing separately. And we wrote a book called Stuck Up Suit many years ago, probably close to 10 now. And there's a character that has kind of stuck with us and stuck with me called Soraya. And I think I would be her because she was just the ballsiest character. She just said what was on her mind and she had no fear. And I loved that she made him chase her. No, she just stuck to who she was always. She dyed her hair based on how she felt, and she just was never afraid to express herself and be different. So probably her.
I think most of my characters are in the worst situation that I am in, so I wouldn't necessarily trade places with them because I've historically written a fair amount of historical fantasy. So while some of my characters are, I admire, I have a great affection for them, I'm also like I don't really want to be like a mixed race woman in like 1800s London. Like, I feel that would challenge me, you know, in ways I don't want to be challenged. That said, I think the main character of Friend Zone Experiment, my first contemporary romance, for very shallow reasons, which is that she was inspired by the kind of K-drama chaebol kind of character, you know, the heiress. So she's like really wealthy, she's really good looking, and she's successful as well. The only downside is that she is estranged from her family. Again, a very classic K-drama problem. Whereas I have a good relationship with my family. So, you know, it's kind of, I suppose it's a kind of question, like, would you surrender family relationships for money, beauty, and success? Or maybe I would.
Okay. On that note, how many experiences or how many things that go into your books are pulled from real life, either your experiences or a friend's insane story that you heard?
I'll go. So the main character in my book, Ellie, she has type 1 diabetes. So that is something that is pulled from real life, not my own, but my son's. So when he was first diagnosed, we got a lot of questions from friends and strangers. Um, and we learned that not a lot of people know about the condition. So I thought maybe by giving my main character the same condition, it would somehow help, raise a bit of awareness, knowledge about the condition. So yeah, so that's mine.
Yeah, Behind Enemy Lines, as I said, is set in a city law firm of the kind that I worked at for more than a decade. And I partly did that because I wanted to be able to write fairly quickly. For me, I'm a slow writer. I also still practice as a lawyer, but just in-house at a government agency. Um, so I wanted something I didn't have to do any research for. And almost all the plot, I mean, not the kind of romance related plot, so the fake dating is not drawn from the life, but all the kind of legal subplots are, or rather, they're more like details of the daily life of practicing as a lawyer. A lot of those are drawn directly from my own professional experience, including delivering bad news to a client when they were driving, resulting resulting in a crash. Which is slightly exaggerating it, but I could definitely have softened that slightly. So that happens. That happens in the book. The socially awkward male lead kind of slightly messes up delivering bad news to a client. So yeah, lots of things in Behind Friendly Lines are from the life.
I'm exactly the same. I take little pieces of my life and put it in. I write a lot of lawyers as well because I know it and I'm comfortable with it. But I have a lot of anxiety, so I write a lot of characters with anxiety. It's not necessarily like my personal situations that have happened to me, but it's easy for me to put myself in their place while I'm writing it. I'll also take little bits from friends, and my sister who was divorced had like a crazy dating life, so I love having her as a well to go to. So little things will be some truth to it, but mostly there's no character that's based on someone fully.
And do you do I mean, along similar lines with where you base the books? It's places that you've been, places that you know or have a connection to. I know Cynthia's. I'm in the middle of hers, which this is your first published book. I know you've
Yeah.
done short stories. Uh, but it was like, oh yes, a small little town, an hour and a half outside of Seattle. I was like, this is supposed to be Port Townsend. I'm here for this.
Yeah, so obviously because it's set in the US and it's a fictional town, yes, it is a bit outside of Seattle. So I hopefully it's accurate. I've done a lot of Googling and YouTubing and yeah, so it's a fictional place.
Yeah, I found there was something different about writing a contemporary setting as opposed to a historical or invented kind of setting, which is that I could spend a lot of time on Google Maps kind of, walking around the setting. And even though I lived in London for 9 years, it's surprising how much you get wrong just from your memory. And I think the worst example of this was I wrote a scene set in the Foyles. Foyles is an independent kind of bookstore chain in the UK. And I know it very well. It's on Charing Cross Road, and there's a cafe. And I have had multiple meetups at the cafe, and I was convinced that it looked out on Charing Cross Road. And then when I went to it, thankfully, before while the book wasn't edited, and I could still correct that one scene, I discovered it did not look out on Charing Cross Road. And that was completely my distinct memory of looking down on the street from the cafe had just been completely invented. It actually looks out on like the side of the building, at neighboring buildings. So it is surprising what you get wrong. But I guess if I'd done that, people wouldn't necessarily have noticed that. But that's it. I feel like Londoners get very very indignant about minor errors. So that, I think there was one particular Avengers film where Captain America takes the wrong tube line to Greenwich, and a huge uproar on social media. He couldn't possibly have taken that line to that station.
I love it when people defend. Sorry. I love it when people defend the like, no, this is what happened. This is how you get there. I think that's very, very fun. Bye.
I definitely write a lot in New York because that's where I was born and raised. But I tend to write, I don't write any of the touristy things usually in my books. I write the gritty of living in New York. So my characters will be stuck on the subway and sweating to death when they get into an interview, and then get caught like cleaning their armpits in the bathroom, which is reality of when you actually live here. So I think I write a little bit of the insiders more New York.
I set my college hockey in the States. College hockey is not as big of a thing in Canada. Like it is, but it's not to the same, like we don't have like the really, the big sponsorships, the big like arenas and that kind of thing. So like as a Canadian, I'm pretty familiar with the States, and I've traveled there lots, and we get a lot of American media. But then it's interesting because like Canadianisms will slip into my manuscript. Like I will put words or like a turn of phrase that to me is completely normal, and the editor will be like, what is this? Or they're like, is this just something the character invented? And I'm like, no, like I can't even think of an example right now, but there was something in Offside where they had no idea what I was saying. And I was like, no, like everybody says that, right? And they're like, no. I was like, okay, so this is an Alberta thing.
That's a very familiar issue for me because my English is very confused. I grew up speaking English in Malaysia and then have lived in the UK for like 20 years now. And then I was trying to write an American character, but then wrote something like describe people downing tools. They down tools. And they like, I think they're like cooking. And my American editor was like, what tools were they using? What are you trying to say here? And it's just a really standard phrase used in the UK to say, they stopped work. Especially actually in a professional context, we'd be told a client asked us to down tools, so don't record any more time to the project or what have you. But yeah, you just assume that actually it's something that's generic and used in across the pond as well, and it turns out not to be the case.
I think that's even regional here in the United States. In New York, when I go to the supermarket, I wait online, and my editor's always like, you wait in line, but we say online. So there's even like regional things here too.
As someone who studied linguistics in college, you can actually trace like down to the small little town that someone is from based on the words and phrases they use. So it's fascinating. It's very fun, and it's fun to see that happen in books too. Like all of you guys were just saying, with the specific things that you say that the editor is like, wait, what?
I ran into a generational one as well, where in a couple of instances I described a character having their messages left on read by their flaky ex or what have you, and I had kind of older editors change that to unread, and I was like, no, they left them on read, they read them and then didn't respond, which is really offensive, right? And had to kind of explain this whole concept, and the blue ticks and so on.
Okay, aside from your laptop, notebook, etc., what else do you need in your writing space to help you create?
Coffee.
Need that caffeine.
Coffee, even now.
Like noise canceling headphones too, especially with the kids. That's people. I need it to be like completely quiet so I can focus.
Food, some snacks, and also some scented candles normally, um, to set the mood. But yeah, snacks usually.
So do you guys have writing rituals then that like you have to set it all up and do it a specific way, or can you just sit down and start going?
Yeah, I don't have any particular writing rituals. I like writing on the sofa, which I know is ergonomically bad for me, but somehow it feels comfier. So I'm sure it'll catch up with me someday. I actually find, and I find the internet quite helpful. I know it can be a distraction, but when I'm writing, I often do want to kind of look up things and kind of check that a word has the meaning I want to. So actually, one of my favorite resources is the Oxford English Dictionary online, which is like really great because it gives you like etymology and kind of, when was the earliest use of a term and so on. Very helpful if you're writing a historical setting. And most libraries in the UK give you access to OED online. So things like that. But yeah, I'm kind of a plonk myself down on the sofa and go typewriter, which I'm sure, all of us who've kind of got busy lives and other obligations kind of learn to be.
I tend to write 2 books at a time. So I have an office and I only go in there when I'm doing my writing. I don't go in there. I'm never in there unless I'm writing. So it's kind of just been trained. I trained myself. Like when I get in there, I start writing. And in the morning I'll do one book and then I'll take like an administrative break and I'll walk on. Also have a walking treadmill now because I'm spending way too many hours sitting. And so I'll do admin work in the afternoon standing and typing, and then I'll go back to my desk and I'll take the second half of the day writing a second book.
Are they usually in the same genre or kind of different genres or?
They can be. They're usually until the last year or two, the last 2 or 3 years, I've been doing thrillers. So then I would do a romance in the morning and a thriller in the afternoon. But I never write 2 of my own books at the same time. It's always unless it's a different genre. I write co-writes with Penelope Ward. So usually I'll do the morning my own and then the afternoon in the co-write. And it's a little different because we plot the co-write. So we've already spent a month with a very detailed outline. I know what I'm going to write. And so it's a little bit different of an experience, whereas I don't plot anything in my solos. So it's a different mindset.
That sounds a really nice balance.
Yeah, it is. And the co-writing, I don't know if anybody's ever done it, is so much fun. So it does kind of like, especially if your morning is hard and you're not sure where you're going with your story and you're kind of like hitting a little bit, because it's plotted, it's there for me to start right away and I have somebody to bounce it off of. So it is nice.
So do romances just feel like more of a you write them in the morning, they fit the morning vibe better, or does it alternate?
I'm the morning person. I'm like a 4 o'clock in the morning person. So I get up super early and I like to get started early. Um, so yeah, romance, I'm fresher in the morning. So I think I'm able to be a little bit more creative. And since our co-writes are already plotted, it's easier. So I do that in the afternoon, but sometimes I switch them up. I just need a separation. So I try to do like an hour or two of admin in the middle of my day, but I'm definitely like a sit in my office and I don't come downstairs till 5:30 ever. And on Saturday I do a half a day. So it's been 13 years now. So I'm very ritualistic now about it and I treat it like a job.
It's cool that you've gotten it down to like such a consistent schedule. Like I know consistency helps a ton with things. So I think that's cool. Um do. Okay, so Vi, since you don't plot, and this question is open to anyone else as well, do any of your characters end up surprising you? Like you thought it was all going to go one way and they're like, no, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's funny because some people will ask me what my process is, and I'm like, well, my process is that I don't plot, and then I get to about 25,000 words, and then I throw the book away. So my characters definitely, I start out really excited about a book, and because I don't plot, and I've tried to plot, it doesn't work. Um, I do wind up taking a big turn, and sometimes I turn and just throw it out and start over with a completely different book and a different idea. So I definitely meander, and I'll have to go back. I'll start writing and I'll get 20,000 words into it, and I'll put a little comment. Okay, from here on, she's got this problem and this problem, and then I have to go back and fix all of that. So I definitely develop as I go, and they change a lot if I keep them all the way through.
Why do you think you're able to plot with the co-written projects? Is it having that other person to kind of bounce off?
Yeah, I plotted one book over a decade ago. I spent like weeks plotting it, very detailed. I got to chapter 4 or 5 and I wound up just going somewhere else with it. So I feel like my brain just kind of wants the freedom. Whereas
Mm.
when it's two of us, we're bouncing things off each other all the time. When we started out not plotting as well 10 years ago, and we've just gotten a little more structured over the years, but yeah, it's just easier because I'm sharing with someone. I mean, when I write my solos, even though I spend from 5 in the morning till 10 at night talking to Penelope Ward on various devices all day, I don't even tell her my plot because I want her to be the first person to read it. So I don't really discuss it much with anybody except for my poor husband who has to listen to me. But yeah, so it definitely goes easier for me having somebody to talk through, and then I'll say, one little piece, and then she's like, "Oh, let's do this." And then, kind of evolves faster.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think George R. R. Martin came up with this kind of metaphor analogy. So he said, some writers are gardeners, and I think that's kind of pantser you're kind of discovering. Um, Although I don't really know that that's how gardeners work. But anyway, maybe you plant seeds and you see what happens. Maybe that's the idea. And then some are architects and you build a building. You've got the the structure, the kind of architectural drawings. And I used to say that I'm like an architect, but then I plan the building, I build it, and it collapses, and I have to kind of dig the book out of the out of the ruins, and it looks quite different from the original plan. So yeah, I outline, but sometimes I think my outline's literally just there as a repository for my anxiety about like not knowing what's going to happen next. And then even though I've got the outline, once I start writing, it doesn't always follow the outline, but at least I have the outline as my kind of comfort blanket.
Do the characters often survive the collapse of the plot?
The characters always survive. It's like I think the problem with outlining is that you kind of come up with a plot. You think, oh, that sounds really great, and lots of exciting things happen, and so on. And then once you start writing, you're like, I don't know that actually makes sense for the character to do that. They are just doing that because the plot wants them to, and that's. I don't think. I think particularly in a genre like romance, which is very character driven and driven by the kind of interiority of the characters. That's like a really bad call if you feel like the character's just going through the motions, because the author wants the plot to turn out a certain way. I think it has to feel really organic and that the characters are doing what makes sense for who they are. So it always, I feel like as you write your draft, you get to know the characters better. They start coming alive, they have conversations, their relationships become clear. And then it becomes clearer and clearer to you what they would do in any particular situation. And you're like, shit, the outline makes them do something they just wouldn't do in the situation.
Yeah, I think I'm like a bit of a hybrid. Like I'll usually know certain turning points, like maybe when they kiss or like what the dark moment will be. And then a lot of it's kind of just like that iteration of like discovering. And then like that just reminded me too, like with my next release, I had to go back to the beginning because I knew the characters better. And then I kind of had to rewrite the beginning. The beginning had like not been landing right with me. And I was like, something's going on here. But then I get to like, chapter 20, and I was like, now, because the hero was like a quieter, more like, closed off person. I was like, now I know him better. Now I have to go back, fix all of the beginning. Because like you said, I think if you have a really good handle on the characters, it does get so much easier because they would just naturally respond in a certain way in all of those given situations.
Another audience question. What's your favorite trope to read?
Yeah, enemies to lovers. And fake dating, actually. I don't think I've ever met anyone in real life who is involved in a fake relationship. But,
It's so
as soon as you
common.
read a book and yeah, as soon as you read a book and you go, okay, that makes sense. They definitely have to fake date. So, yeah, I love reading that.
Yeah, that's mine too. Anything fake, fake dating, fake engagement, fake marriage, or like Vegas marriage, anything where they're just like forced to be together in some kind of awkward way and then it becomes real. Definitely, it's like my favorite to read and to write. So.
Yeah, I think forced proximity, in all its variation is definitely one of my favorite. I really love an arranged marriage story as well, but that also obviously only works in certain contexts. Quite difficult to find in a contemporary kind of Western context.
How did the tropes that you love make it into your books, and what are your favorite tropes to write?
I definitely write what I love to read. I mostly write billionaire and office romance and sports, and I alternate between them, not evenly, but I tend to go back and forth between those two mostly, and that's what I love to read. So I don't know if I could, if I don't love reading something, I don't think I could write it. If it's not what I'm going to read, I wouldn't be able to write it. So definitely write what I like to read.
Yeah, I think the forced proximity trope is definitely evident in Behind Frenemy Lines, and then I'm sufficiently attached to it that I think the most extreme manifestation of it in my books actually was in Blackwater Sister, which is kind of contemporary, but with like so very much our world, but with the assumption that gods and ghosts are real. And in that book, the main character is being haunted by her grandmother, who literally is living in her head and seeing everything that she does, and not able to read her thoughts but kind of able to go through her phone. And so I think you can't really get more proximate than that. But yeah, I think there's lots of things I like to read that I wouldn't necessarily be able to achieve myself. But I kind of like to reproduce those things, I guess, in a slightly sideways way.
Yeah, I think similar to why I like to write what I like to read as well. So mostly, I like enemies to lovers. So I like writing that and fake dating as well. And those two tropes are in my book. So, yeah, I read what I love to write. Sorry, I write what I like to read.
Yeah, I usually do. Like I will read other sports or I will read contemporary or like small town. The only exception is like I don't tend to read any other hockey just because it gets me kind of back into like work mode and then I start thinking about my book and I can't like shut my brain off. So I can do other sports, but I typically just stay out of hockey romance.
That's hard though. I feel like there are more hockey romances than there are any other sport romance. Um, okay, so publishing journey, it's different for everyone. Avery, you mentioned you started as a Wattpad writer. Did you get picked up from Wattpad?
I had the first book I wrote there kind of just go accidentally viral. Like I still had a day job working for the government. I wasn't even really paying that much attention. The book just sort of took off. And then I think that they approached me asking me to put it in paid first. And then I wrote Offside on Wattpad, which Bramble picked up later. So it was sort of just like getting it put into paid gave me a bit of validation that like people would pay for my work. And then the books did quite well in the paid program. And I was like, okay, I wonder what else I could do with this. And then I sort of shifted into self-publishing because I wanted a bit more autonomy and just to like reach a broader audience. And then books got picked up by Bramble last year.
Had you always wanted to try and be traditionally published, or was it kind of an evolution of, oh, well, like this worked out, and so then maybe something else will keep going?
No, it was like a huge dream of mine being bookstores. But when I first started writing more like 2017, 2018, there wasn't a lot, like a new adult was having a moment in indie, but there wasn't a lot of appetite for any new adult in traditional publishing. So I'd actually kind of given up on the idea a little bit for like the following few years. I was like, okay, well, traditional publishing isn't really interested in college romance, and I'll just continue to do my own thing. And then I was really encouraged, obviously, like, 2022, 23, when traditional publishing started, republish or I'm not sure where they republished Al Kennedy, but just in the early, grade there where they started republishing that, and then like Icebreaker broke out, and I was like, okay, maybe there's a chance, because I always really did want to, be in bookstores broadly and just like reach that audience as well. So yeah, it was super exciting.
What about everyone else? How did you get to where you are now, agent, publishers, etc.?
I had a very classic for SFF, I think, path of I started out in short fiction and started getting published in kind of, fantasy magazines. And then thought, I'd really like to write a novel. And I actually wrote two kind of novel length things. They didn't really work in any way as novels, so it's hard to call them novels. They were certainly as long as a novel, but not kind of structured properly and so on. And then with the third book that I wrote, I was like, so those just went straight in the drawer, the first two, because I knew they weren't any good. But with the third that I finished, I thought this has some potential. So I revised that, sent it to various agents, got offered representation, revised the book, worked on the book with her for a year actually, and then we went in submission and kind of sold it to a traditional publisher, and I've been traditionally published ever since. Yeah, so that was kind of a kind of classic, the kind of traditional publishing story, I suppose.
Did your publisher agent get kind of like, oh, I don't know about this when you said you wanted to try doing a romance? Or did you wrote the thing and gave it?
I sort of wrote the thing, and actually I initially planned to self-publish it. But I just realized, because I still have the day job, and then I have kids as well. I just realized that I couldn't quite manage. I wasn't going to be able to manage two writing careers, which effectively, I know some hybrid authors who did very, very successfully, but I just knew I didn't have the capacity for that additional strand. So when I concluded that actually self-publishing wasn't going to be the way for the friend zone experiment, actually, I went to my agent and said, I've kind of written this thing, I don't know if you want to look at it. I was really embarrassed about it, to be honest, because I kind of felt she was probably waiting for another fantasy from me. But she was very supportive. And yeah, so she was very happy to take it out to the market for me.
Cynthia or Vi, either of you have interesting publishing tidbits about how you got to?
I'm really lucky my first year, and I got an agent my first year, but I stayed indie for a while. I did, I sold audio rights, and I sold tons of foreign rights. I stayed indie for a while, and then Penelope Ward and I made our first traditional publishing probably about 8 years ago, and we did 3 books with the publisher, and then we went back to being indie. And so I've kind of done a little bit of everything. I've done audio first. Now I have a publisher that just does my paperback, and I keep my ebooks and my audio. I have publishers that are traditional, fully traditional books. So it's been interesting. I feel like right now, especially, it's really important to be in the books and be in the stores, in romance. And I've kind of gone back and forth with my stubbornness, because I didn't think at the beginning that I was going to be able to keep what I wanted to do, the freedom of it. And every editor that I've worked with has been pretty amazing. And so I really kind of avoided it, thinking, I've always heard horror stories that somebody rips your manuscript apart, or, they don't like it after you turn it in. And I just had really great experiences with my editors where they didn't change too much, and they just really added things that had a lot of value. So I think I was afraid the first couple of years, and that's why it took me a little bit to make the jump.
I think mine was pretty straightforward. So this debut that I published in May, that was my fourth book that I've written. So I had 3 failed ones. So I wrote them, shopped them around to agents, didn't get any offers. With this one, I went to do a mentorship called Smooch Pit. And the mentor worked with me to sort of polish the book. And then I got signed by my agent. and then we shopped it around to editors, and we got the offer from Bramble. Yeah, and that's it.
Well, I'm very glad it worked out. Having a fun time with all of the books. Okay, probably going to be our last question unless someone else pops one up in chat, but I think this is a good one to end on. What do you think is interesting or exciting about the direction that modern romance is going? What do you feel has been changing in the genre?
Can I go? I
Yeah.
feel like there's a lot more. So when I started reading romance a long time ago, um, there's not many books that has people like me in as main characters. So and there's a lot more books like that these days. So I think it's interesting and also very positive that there's a lot more books with characters like people of colors and marginalized characters. So yeah, so I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, I think the diversity point was one that leapt out to me as well, that it's an increasingly diverse genre. And as always, you know, there's a ways to go, but I think there's definitely been marked improvement in that area. I suppose the other thing, I mean, this is a couple of decades in now, but when I was growing up and I would like borrow my mum's Harlequins or what have you know, Mills and Boon novels kind of surreptitiously, a lot of the time, you know, the male leads weren't very attractive to me, at least. You know, they were very alpha, they were quite angry. Um, you know, I would sort of read them as a kind of little feminist, being like, what an asshole, you know? And I definitely think there's been a huge shift in that you know, is actually recognized in the genre now that like women are attracted to men who are nice to them. Um, and that's something I much prefer reading. So both as a reader and much prefer writing as well. So both as a reader and writer, I feel I've benefited from that change.
Yeah, I think
Have
especially
so
in
much
sports,
stronger
there's been like
heroines. Sorry, go ahead, Avery.
oh, sorry. I think especially in sports, there's been like a real tendency to like the green flag heroes, which I also prefer. So it's been nice to kind of see that like you can have the two flawed characters moving through their arcs and like working through their problems. And maybe it's not always perfect, but I think the relationships still tend to be fairly healthy. And I like that. Like at least in contemporary, I know dark sports or dark romance is doing its own thing probably, but yeah, I think there's like a tendency for things to just be healthier, which I think is really positive.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, yeah, just to be clear, I think like dark romances definitely has its place, right? But I think what was worrying about the older ones, where they didn't think they were dark romances. They were extremely unpleasant relationships, but you know, they're kind of portrayed as aspirational, and that's kind of what was the issue, right?
Yeah, like normalized.
Yeah, I think the heroines are much stronger now. I think that is when I was reading and stealing my mom's romance novels back in the day, they were more like, I mean, there was always some books with it, but there was a lot of like the hero was always saving the heroine from something, you know, whatever it was, herself or her relationship or just like helping her get along her way. And I feel like a lot of the books I'll write now and a lot of books that I'll read, the heroine is helping the hero. So the hero's got his issues and she's helping him figure it out. So I like that the movement has been towards more powerful heroine characters.
I did have a male literary fiction reader once say to me, "Oh, you know, the male lead in your, you know, this is the friend zone experiment, my first romance novel. He's not very active." And I said to him, "He's the romantic interest. He doesn't have to be the active. The woman is the protagonist, you know, in most MF romance." Which I think I'm sure was a hard pill for him to swallow. I should say that Will Lead is actually active. He just doesn't achieve that much, which, you know, men expect male characters in books to be effective, and you know it's a kind of power fantasy, and I think if they're not used to reading romance by women, they can get a bit confused when it's the other way around.
Okay, any last questions from those watching? If you have one, pop it in the questions real quick. I do love, though, the trend that we're moving away from the miscommunication romance. Everyone's talking to each other now. Like in real life, you're supposed to talk to each other and communicate. And it's okay if it's like a misunderstanding that's the conflict. But I really appreciate that for the most part, we've moved away from, oh, well, there's a misunderstanding and I'm just going to go and sulk about it for the next half of the book. I'm glad we're over that.
Agree. If it can be resolved in 2 seconds, I'm just too frustrated to read. Like, all you got to do is go tell her what was supposed to happen.
Okay. Yeah. Um, we're getting close to time. So, any last thoughts on modern romance and why you like writing it?
I think it goes back to what Cynthia was saying, which actually there's something really fun about being in the genre where you've got that guaranteed happy ending, and we're exploring love in kind of all its forms.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know like how many romance writers have anxiety too. Because when Vi touched on that, I was like, yes, I also have anxiety. So for me, it's very like calming to go into the book knowing that they will get the happily ever after. Like if I don't know, like it's uncertain, like if she might die or something, like I don't want to read that because I'm gonna just be on the edge of my seat the whole time. Like I think it's like a safe way sort of to explore like those ups and downs, but in the end, they will be together.
I think that's what I've always loved about romance is that it's reliable, right? It's like even if it wasn't the best book I've ever read, it was reliable and it was my escape. And you hope that you do the same thing for readers. They start to trust you after a while, and that you're going to give them the happy ending, even if it's like a lot of angst to get there.
Okay, looks like Billy has posted the thank you everyone message in the chat. So, yeah, thank you for coming. We're glad that you could all join us and this amazing panel of authors from all over the world, which is just extra fun. Um, yeah, I had a really great time. There were some really good questions in there. Good job, guys. Thanks for making me not do all the work.
Thank you all for coming and have a great Sunday. We have 3 more virtual events coming up later today. So hope to see some of you at one or more of those. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks.